In this lesson, we're going to talk about understanding keyframe interpolation and use a practical example of animating our train in from left to right and slowing down its animation over time. Okay, so I want to actually animate what we're going to be creating here on the inside of the map composition. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want that train to move along with the speed of the map, and it's just going to be easier if we go inside of that comp. So I'm going to toggle up my layers here in the main composition. There's my map there at the very bottom. We'll double click that map to go in that comp, and then I'm just going to zoom in here to where these train tracks are. And we'll grab our train from here inside of our project panel and just drop it on top of everything else. And you can see it's a little bit too big, so we can scale this down by grabbing the corner of it and holding shift. Probably just right about there, maybe a little bit bigger. That might be a little bit too small actually. So grab the corner, click, and then hold shift. Probably right in there. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of put that where the top of it sticks out over those train tracks, and we're going to start it over here on the left. And then let's go back out to our main composition and figure out when we want this train to start coming in to the station. So probably right about here is where it needs to start, right when it's visible. And actually, we could probably cheat a little bit by pulling the train completely off the tracks, even though it's going to be backwards a little bit. If we go back into the map comp, you'll see that's going to be off the tracks. But if we pull it back over here, then it'll be entering as if it wasn't there before. So I think that might add a little bit to it. So we'll start right about here at, let's say, right just pretty much in between 5 and 6. We're at 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 11 frames. Then we'll go back into our map comp and we'll set a keyframe for the position of the train right there. And if you had your current time indicator in the right place on that main transportation comp, then it will translate to the inside of your map comp. So if we hold down train or select train and hit the P key to bring up its position, we'll go ahead and set a keyframe by hitting the stopwatch. And then we don't want this to last the entire run of the animation. So I'm going to go back out to the main transportation composition, and we'll say probably right about here is a good time for that to basically ease into the station, come to a complete stop. So let's go back into the map comp, and it looks like that's right about here. So I'm just going to hold the train and move it over. Now I want the train to go in a perfectly straight line, and if I just try to drag it, it might not be exactly perfect. So I can hold shift while I drag that, and that will allow it not to move up or down. So we'll put that right there where the nose of the train is kind of right there at the end. So that's what it looks like. And I'm just going to come over here and use a couple keyboard shortcuts to trim the work area so we're not ramp previewing the entire thing. So I will just kind of bring this right before that first keyframe, hit the B key for beginning, and then we'll come over here to the end with my current time indicator and hit the N key for the end. And that's just going to set those in and out points for the work area to be a little bit faster for our ramp preview. And then I'll hit the 0 key, and you can see what this looks like. So right now it looks really boring and really slow. And so I want to add a little bit of interest to this with keyframe interpolation. So the first way that you can do this is by selecting both of your keys or one of your keys, depending on which one. In fact, I want this to be coming in at full speed, almost like it's been coming for a long time. So I'm going to leave this first one as linear, and we'll just only change the interpolation of the second one. I think that will actually give us a better result. So you select the keyframe that you want to change the interpolation of, and then you'll go up to animation, go to keyframe assistant, and choose one of these 3 options. So let's talk about what these mean. if you're choosing easy ease, it's going to basically ease on both sides of the keyframe. And you would pretty much only use that if you had 3 keyframes in a row, and that would be applied to the middle one. So you would slow into arriving to that keyframe and then slow out of exiting it and moving on to the next one. So since we only have 2 keyframes here, we can use easy ease in because we're easing into the position of the keyframe. So a train is a really good example for this because you can see it slowing in to the end of the track. So you can remember in is like a train coming into the station, and easy ease out is like leaving the station. So if we wanted our train to go slow, then fast, and then slow again at the end, we would use an easy ease out on this first one. But I don't want it to look like that. I want it to kind of just start very abruptly because that's what our animation requires. So you can see it goes more slowly at the end. So kind of slow to slower. And this looks a lot more natural. But if you want it to be an even greater push on that change in velocity, you can change it in the graph editor. So the graph editor is going to be located right here. If you click that, it's going to change your timeline where you see your keyframes to this new look. And this is really beneficial now in Creative Cloud. It's not something that you've probably experienced before, but now we have the ability to animate our Y and our X separately from each other, which gives you a lot more flexibility. But we don't have any animation on our Y-axis because we're just going from left to right, which only entails the X. So I'm just going to select my X, and what I want is to be able to control the handles of this. And because I've got 2 different dimensions here, I need to come down here and choose separate dimensions. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to use handles to manipulate this. And it also, by clicking that, you can see it kind of changed that curvature. So what I want to do is pull this handle over so that it's pretty much just kind of just maybe a slow ease out, but pretty much just right on top of this is going to give us a very direct speed. So it's going to be going up, but also towards this end here. So what I'm going to do with this handle is what's important. I'm going to pull this as far to the left as it will let me and even it out with this line. So what this line says about our animation is that it's going to go really, really fast at first and then begin to slow down over time. And pretty much the last 2/3 of the animation will be it slowing down. And the last third is almost going to be completely still, just very smooth. So let's watch this and you'll see what I mean about the smoothness. I'll go ahead and hit the 0 key. And you can see it went from extremely fast to very slow. And actually, I think that our frame rate might be a little bit different from our comp as far as our RAM preview is concerned. So if you want to change that with me really quickly, go to Window, choose Preview, and of course, yeah, we're looking at this at 15 frames per second. So it is possible to change the frame rate of your preview and the frame rate of your composition independently from each other, but you're not going to get realistic playback unless you change this to 24. Now on your screen at home, following along, your animation is probably going to look a lot smoother now that we've changed that to 24. But in the video, it might not look much different to you because the video is being captured at 15 frames per second, so it's hard for you to see some of that in-between detail anyways. So I'm going to play this back again, and to me on my screen, this looks way better. And one of the things that we can add in here just as we're working is some motion blur. This is one of the first things we've done that really adds a significant amount of motion to something. So if we come over here to the train and, oh, it looks like we also need to turn on continuously rasterize. That's going to help just to crispen things up a little bit. But we can also turn on motion blur, which is this switch right here. And if I click that, it's going to say this layer is ready for motion blur. But I have to do one other thing, which is this switch right here, which enables motion blur for all the layers with this switch set. So if I click that, now you can see we get this nice amount of motion blur that really gives it a realistic look like a train would have if it was going really fast and being captured by a camera. Now, because we have some animation on the outside of this comp for our map, everything inside of this should get the same amount of motion blur from that because we have our collapse transformation switch turned on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the motion blur switch for the rest of those layers. And now if we go out to our main transportation composition, probably there's not enough movement for it to need motion blur, but we also do need to turn on motion blur right there. You can see it blurred things ever so slightly, and that's going to help just to make things look a little bit smoother by having that turned on. And you can turn this on for everything. Let's go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to turn that on for everything in this comp. So anything going fast enough to need motion blur will get just a little bit, and anything going really fast like our train will have more. It just kind of depends on how fast you make something, and After Effects automatically calculates that and puts it in there for you. So this hopefully gets you a little bit more comfortable with changing the keyframe interpolation of something based on that speed that you're wanting to change. And in our next lesson, we're going to animate our ship. So now we've animated the train, and then now it's time to animate the ship. It's going to be closer to the beginning here. We're going to kind of do it in this area right here, and we're going to animate it differently than anything we've animated so far. We're going to animate it using an expression. Now you may have heard of an expression before, and it sounds maybe like it's a little bit scary. It's code or math, but the one that we're going to be using is really easy and simple, and it just helps to add a little bit of diversity to the movement of the ship. So we'll come back in the next lesson and animate with an expression.